Hello and welcome back. Here we are for section 3 of chapter 8. And we're going to look at the effects of human activities on marine ecosystems. In other words, what do humans do? Guys, remember HIPPCO. You can apply HIPPCO anytime you want to talk about human effects, and I'm not going to break it down exactly through HIPPCO, but remember that acronym. It'll get you through any FRQ on what humans are doing to this ecosystem, that system, etc. Human activities threaten aquatic biodiversity. Once again, the more biodiverse an area, the healthier it is, and a healthy ecosystem provides lots of ecosystem services, those things we need to survive. The two biggest things affecting the ocean right now, or the ocean ecosystems, are climate change and ocean acidification. So those are the things that we're going to focus on, look at, and what we can do. These two things, which are driven from human interaction, primarily on land, not all, threaten our marine systems. Some of the other threats, just outside of climate change, ocean acidification, are coastal development. We like to live at the beach or the ocean or put up hotels. And this development completely destroys or degrades a lot of these coastal habitats because we turn them from whatever they were into a hotel area that wasn't its normal natural habitat. Runoffs and pollutants. Now, put a picture up here of runoff and pollutants, because when all this runs into the ocean, if it's fertilizers or nutrients, then it causes an algal bloom, and algal blooms, we talk about like the red tide, etc. These things kill off ocean life. So these fertilizers, pesticides, even livestock waste, cow and sheep poop, whatever, lead to these big algal blooms. So this runoff winds up being a big problem. And then we also get oil spills. Oil spills. We just had a brand new one in the Marianas Islands with a tanker from Japan. These things are horrible to an ecosystem, sometimes for a decade to come, for them to recover even after cleanup efforts. So, another one is overfishing. Just overfishing. We are taking more fish out of the sea than the sea can reproduce. We leave some and the fish can reproduce, but when we go to get fish each year, they tend to get smaller and smaller and smaller because we're catching younger and younger stock because we're not giving it time to catch up and run through everything that it needs to for the fish to be in a healthy size stock. Also, there's a lot of destruction of the bottom habitats. A lot of our big trawlers drop nets, and these nets have heavy weights that drag on the ground, so they make sure their net's scooping everything. Well, this dragging along the ground is degrading the habitat at the bottom. It's disrupting all the sea life on the ocean floor, and it takes, once again, a long time for these things to recover, and we keep going back and doing it again and again and again to catch fish, and fish tend to be in certain areas, and we tend to destroy those particular areas trying to get the very thing the ocean's providing for us. And also, we just have the introduction of invasive species that will bring a species that used to be there and here. The lionfish off of the coast of Florida. It's not a Florida fish, but it's warm enough and they survive. Once again, these were fish tanks. Dropped them into the ocean because they don't want to keep them in the fish tank anymore. And now they're breeding and thriving off the coast of Florida, but they don't have any natural predators here. So they can cause a problem. This invasive species that humans tend to bring in. So a lot of these are things that you and I are doing or supporting. If we're eating seafood, we really should try and eat farmed seafood. It is much more ecologically friendly than catching fish straight out of the ocean. Now let's look at the case study in the book of the Chesapeake Bay. Chesapeake Bay is an estuary. Fresh water meets the sea. This is one of the larger ones in the United States. It affects about 6 states and also including Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. So Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, all up around this area. It's been really heavily impacted by human activities since the 1960s. And very large population increase, people moving into that area. And because of the human population increase, once again, remember your HIPPCO. So we have habitat destruction, we have the pollution coming in this case, a lot of our pollution, because of the rise of population, comes from both point and non-point sources. Point source says, we can say, ooh, that waste management facility is dumping sewage directly into the bay. That chemical company is dumping chemicals directly into the bay. That's point source. We know where it's coming from. There's a lot of non-point source. So we know a lot of fertilizers are making their way into the estuary, but we don't really know who's responsible because it's coming from this neighborhood and that neighborhood and this farm and that farm. We just know that they're making it in, but it's non-point because we don't know exactly who's doing it or where the problem's coming from. So they had a lot of pollution in both point and non-point, and this brought up the phosphate and the nitrate levels too high, which once again turns into algal blooms, cutting down the depth. We also had a lot of kind of over harvesting. They were taking out the oysters, which is a keystone species. Now, oysters we use for food. We eat them on the half shell, fried, etc. But they had taken so many out that the oyster population was so reduced that they couldn't filter the pollutants anymore. There used to be so many oysters in Chesapeake Bay that within 3 days they could filter all of the pollutants out of the bay. They're filter feeders. They sit down there and they suck all the water in, they pull out the nutrients and some pollutants, and they spit clean water back out. So they're a natural filter feeder and they clean out the systems. But we removed so many, it was taking over a year for the population to do what the population used to be able to do in 3 days. Water was becoming more turbid, cloudy, causing a problem. 1983, they started the Chesapeake Bay program. So they integrated a lot of coastal management along with some local and state and federal government incentives, as well as citizen groups got involved because they saw what was happening to the bay. It was degrading, life was dying, it was bad. A lot of pollution, the runoff, the algal blooms, and they realized they needed to do something. By 2018, the most recent assessments have shown that the populations of blue crabs, the striped bass, and anchovies have largely increased. So this is one of these things that we can look at as a success story. Once again, it's taken decades to try and help get it recovered because it took it decades to get in trouble. If we look at something and identify it and go after it, we can help the problem. Entirely fixing it, taking back to exactly what it was, can be incredibly difficult. But they're human problems. We created them, and a lot of times we can fix them if we put our mind to it. All right, that is it for section 3. Join me next time when we talk about freshwater ecosystems. Take care, guys.